The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Lands and Forestry. According to a recent UN report, more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction in our lifetime. While I was glad to hear about the new protected areas announced on Monday, it is clear that there's still much to do. Nearly all the areas announced came from a list of almost 100 wilderness areas that were mapped, studied, and identified under the NDP government more than 5 years ago. And the remaining areas are also deeply important to Nova Scotians and, if protected, would help us meet and exceed the government's target of protecting 13% of our land mass, which is a target which I would suggest needs to move. Mr. Speaker, when will the government protect those remaining wilderness areas?
The Honourable Minister of Lands and Forestry.
Thank you for the question, and we share the concern that Nova Scotians have and the member has for the decline of species at risk in the province and across the globe. It is threatening numbers when you see 60% of the wildlife being reduced over the last 40 years in the globe. That's why we're taking action. The department actually hired an extra 2 biologists within the last year to focus on this very topic because it is of concern. We're updating our recovery teams. We continue to protect more land, as the member referenced. So the Minister of Environment and I got together and put together a list that had the most highest biodiversity value. 7,400 hectares of land was just protected, 17 sites with another 7,000 hectares on the way. So we continue to work hard on those sites. It's important to our government. We're going to continue along the list and make sure that we're looking at the areas that have those species at risk and the important habitat that needs to be protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, one of the areas that the minister announced will be protected, pending further consultation and survey work, is the St. Mary's River. The Atlantic Salmon Federation, salmon biologists, and the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans have all said that protecting the St. Mary's River is key to recovery of the salmon population. And yet the gold company St. Barbara's is proposing to build an open pit gold mine in the area that would process ore, store toxic tailings, and draw thousands of litres a day from the St. Mary's River watershed. Mr. Speaker, if the government is concerned with protecting the important salmon habitat in the St. Mary's River, how can it at the same time entertain a proposal for an open pit gold mine that would directly threaten it?
The honourable member, Minister of Lands and Forestry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad that the member references St. Mary's River. It's an important piece that's in the next batch that we've committed to protecting. It just needs some work around surveying and such, and that's one of the reasons why it does take time. Once the land is put into the pending category in the Parks and Protected Plan, many of those sites were put in right before the election. The NDP put in before all that due diligence work needed to be completed. The public consultation needed to be looked at, but we are committed to protecting St. Mary's River. It is one of the largest corridors, over 30 kilometers of wildlife corridor within that space, so we're committed to that, and we'll have more news in the coming months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.